As a point of reference with respect to my first point, let's start with the distinction we're all familiar with between profit-led and demand-led growth. Right? That's a distinction that people on the left have been talking about for a long time. But I think we're just beginning to understand how profit-led really works and the importance of asset price bubbles in that process. Now, there are different ways of making this point, but probably a quick way of getting into the central issue is by means of talking about the inherent maturity mismatch, maturity risk in any system of financial intermediation. The way a financial system of intermediation keeps maturity mismatch under wraps is by means of addressing liquidity risk. So when you go back to the golden age or the mass production economy, whatever term you like to use, during the period of demand-led growth, we had a credit mechanism that was based by banks. And the liquidity problem was basically taken care of by the lender of last resort provision. How does that change? Well, that changes after the 1980s with financial liberalization. And we eventually end up with a system of credit mechanism that is market-based. Right? And liquidity provision basically is based on market liquidity. And the market liquidity works as long as asset prices keep rising. Okay? That's the lesson. Now, what's the theoretical framework that we can place this on? What's the macroeconomic mechanism of the bubble? Very briefly, I'd like to just refer to a few comments that have not been sufficiently developed by Keynes in the treatise. We see a clear distinction between asset prices and goods prices. And asset price speculation, mispricing if you like, is a crucial part of the business cycle. That's what's unique about the treatise in relation to general theory. But the idea that I'd like to emphasize is the mechanism of the bubble. In its bare essentials, in a nutshell, this is the story. When you take a business cycle expansion, Keynes makes this distinction between a bull market with a consensus of opinion and a bull market with a division of opinion. What does that mean? Initially, you have a period in which asset prices go rising. The predominant opinion in the markets is that they haven't risen enough. Okay? That's what he means by a bull market with a consensus of opinion. Then you have the second phase, the late expansion phase, when more and more people start getting edgy. They start thinking that asset prices have risen more than enough. That's when you have the development of what he calls a bear position. Later he called the alternative view or the other view in his 1907 article, what have you. And that's the bull market with a division of opinion. Now here's the idea to bookmark, which I'll come back to. The crucial macroeconomic mechanism of the bubble involves the banking system recycling the bear funds to the bulls. More and more people become cautious with the rising prices. Those are the bear funds. But then those bear funds are channeled to the bulls, which lead to further increases in prices. So you get this unstable dynamic. Okay. Let's bookmark that. And I'll come back to that after I go over the second point. The second point, the theoretical point, is what we make of global imbalances, how we read them. What do I mean by reading them from the capital account side? Well, we're all familiar with reading it from the current account side. What does that say? That says that the cause of the global imbalances is overspending in the United States, right? And the reason these imbalances are not corrected by market forces is policy exchange rates overseas on the part of surplus countries. There are variants of this, but nonetheless, this is the main story. The main disagreement happens as to what the cause of the overspending is, right? Nowadays, there are two views within the mainstream economists that are under currency, that are current. Whether it's a failure of regulation, as Bernanke argues, or is it really something that's caused by the lax monetary policy of the Federal Reserve, right? That's where things pretty much come to an end. Now, implicitly, you're presuming that an international as opposed to a transnational economy. What is the distinction? An international economy means that you have all these different national economies with their distinct systems of financial intermediation, and the driving force in the global economy is basically trade. And that, of course, very much different from a notion of a transnational economy, where you have the emergence of a global system of financial intermediation. To make sense of what that really means, think of the following. We're all familiar with the notion that the reserves on the part of surplus countries would have a contractionary effect. Right? And that's something Keynes was talking about back in Bretton Woods days. Well, what happens to those reserves? They're recycled. They're not recycled by a mechanism that Keynes was proposing by means of an international public control over the financial system, but it's done so privately.